Hello, and welcome to the Brave New Weed podcast. And now, here's your host, Joe Dolce.
Welcome to the Brave New Weed podcast, listeners. This is High-Minded Conversations for the Post-Prohibition Era, and this is episode 66. We are well into our second year, heading into our third year. It's sort of amazing. I'm Joe Dolce, your host, and I'm with my co-founder and co-producer, Matthew Hendershot. Matthew.
Joe, lovely to hear your voice again. Happy to be back on the show.
Fantastic. I'm glad to hear your voice again also. This is an episode, I'm going to give it a little tease, with a really interesting guy named Seth Ginsberg, who has started a foundation called the Global Healthy Living Foundation, and with a whole bunch of websites and apps for people suffering from pain and arthritis. And it's specifically focused on medical cannabis, otherwise known as marijuana for medical use. We have a whole new name now, MMU. I really want you to listen to this because everybody knows someone with pain. So if you do, you should share this episode widely because his organization, his website alone has 10,000 visitors a day, all peer-to-peer patients and advocacy, and they're even doing patient-centered research, which is very rare and very necessary. So stay tuned for this amazing episode.
Before we jump into that interview, Joe, why don't we talk a little bit about some news?
Well, my news is that I'm going to do my very first ayahuasca journey this weekend.
Really? That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what, if anything, this very revealing plant is going to reveal inside of me. What I also like, it's also interesting because it's a very structured experience. You do it with a guide. You do it fairly alone, even though you're with other people. It is not in any way a sort of a recreational substance experience. So I'm very interested. Yeah. So I'm not looking forward to puking, but though I'm certainly no stranger to it. But I am looking to see what the plant does and how it dances inside of me. So that's my news. What's your news?
Oh, I was just going to say, after you finish that up, we'll have to take a moment on a future episode to discuss. It may not be directly related to cannabis, but it is related to altered states of consciousness and ultimately personal health and wealth and well-being.
That's what I think, and sort of the idea of reintegrating plant medicines into our lives, and cannabis certainly sits in that category.
Indeed.
But these things have a long, thousands of year history about how they were used ceremonially, and the effects they had on society and each individual within it. So it's very interesting to sort of think that right now at this point in time, as we enter 2020, we're trying to find that again as a way, maybe as a bit of a retreat from the technical, digital, fast pace of change that's besieging us all.
Interesting.
Don't you think?
Well, it's very curious. I actually just had on my other podcast a psychologist, and we talked a lot about mental health and what the current state of the world is, especially with the prevalence of social media and just the way that we've moved our interpersonal interactions away from person to person and physical contact into communicating via phones or communicating via the internet or people listening to podcasts as a way to be a part of a conversation without actually being in front of a person. And I think it's just everyone is in a place where we're hyper conscious of what we're letting go of and how much we're letting technology take over these what used to be very human elements of our lives.
So I think these plants then, maybe their role, that the fact that they're resurging so rapidly, and so many people I know are interested in these topics, it's not an accident. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think people are looking for the solution to our common issue right now, which is that we've lost touch with each other.
Disconnection. Yeah, definitely. So that's my news. Any other news in the world of cannabis that you've been paying attention to?
A couple interesting things that popped up this week that I think are worth mentioning. The first of which is actually, if we look to the north of the United States and our good friends Canada, there's some moving and shaking going on as they move into Cannabis 2.0. The most specific of which is that the state of Quebec is raising its legal age for cannabis consumption from 18 to 21. And I was curious to get your take on what you think about that, Joe.
I think it's not going to. First of all, it's a province, not a state. But let's not Americanize Canada, please.
Sure, fair play.
I think it's not going to make a whit's bit of difference. Everybody knows that the high schools of North America and Europe are the world's largest dispensaries. I'm not saying that as a brag, okay? I'm just saying it as a fact. And it even was 100 years ago when I was in high school, that was the case, okay? So anybody who wants to get access to these substances can.
Yeah.
It's not a big challenge. So I think it's the state sort of patting itself on the back in some weird way and saying, we're going to protect the youth from this. I think much more a wise approach would be education, honest, straightforward education. This is what the plants do. These are the possible harms and risks that you need to be aware of if you use them. And there are, and they should be articulated in a very formal and in a very unemotional way, I think. And that should be true with every substance. It should be true with every drug, for God's sakes. It should be true with alcohol.
Yeah.
This should just be, it should be a foundational knowledge that every human being gets when they're young, so they can make an informed choice. Not that they're going to make particularly interesting or good choices when you're very young, but let's not dismiss them. Okay, let's not dismiss that their own agency in this. So I do feel that it's a bit silly that they're doing that. The other crazy thing that Canada does is every package of edibles, get this, is limited at 10 milligrams.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's
is just crazy. Do you know how expensive that's going to be?
Yeah, I can
say
understand.
You need 20 milligrams for a dose. You're suddenly paying over $20 or $30 for an edible.
Well,
that's
but
insane.
are you paying by the milligram in this case, or do you think that these edible prices will just be blanketed? Like I know that like a Moon Bar, for example, or something that I think it was called a Moon Bar, was like 200 milligrams in the bar. Does the cost go down with the concentration, do you think?
It doesn't matter. It's limited. You cannot buy a package with more than 10 milligrams in it.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. But does that 10 milligram package cost like a Snickers bar, or does it cost like...
No, it costs high cost. These are expensive. No, these are high expensive products in Canada. So I think that's a little wacky and misguided, frankly. I mean, I think they're pricing themselves out of the legal market in Canada, which is the same in California as well, by the way. So, I think the idea that we're going to just reap tax revenue, it sort of ignores the fact that there is a massive black market that has been existing for over 70 years now and isn't going to go away. And, people aren't going to pay that much more for a stamp and a pretty jar.
Well, and that's exactly the criticisms of this move. Obviously, in the first year of legalization, we've talked about this on the show before. Once cannabis was legalized, teen use actually declined. Like they have those statistics that said teen use is going down. And then, in the words of a great religious author, to forbid is to invite a haunting. So this way of like, hey, we dangled it out there for a year and now we're taking it back away from you, I think you're going to do more harm than good. And like you said, you're just going to be driving people back to the black market.
Yeah, well, if they ever leave. I mean, if the prices are so high. So, look, it's all early days. Hopefully they'll get smart. They'll realize what's going on and adjust. But let's see. Let's see what the people in charge have to say. Any other news catch your eye?
Well, I did want to, I know on the past several episodes we've been talking about these vape-related illnesses and this sort of epidemic that's been going around the United States with e-cigarette devices and, potential black market cartridges and all this stuff. And the most recent update on that is that the CDC has announced that it seems as though this vape-related illness is declining or at least leveling off.
Yeah, I think so.
So I think people have gotten the word. They're aware of the dangers and they're reacting in kind and they're reacting responsibly. And I imagine that's why we're seeing less people come down sick. We have seen over 1,000 individuals who've shown the signs of the condition, and we have had 34 people in total who have died from this illness, and hopefully we're stemming that off now. And whether that's a concept or whether that's a result of the actions of states to ban or temporarily suspend sales of like flavored cartridges or things like that, whether that's raised awareness, it's hard to say the cause, but the result is definitely a positive that we seem to be stemming this off. The other last little interesting bit of this is this condition now has an official name.
Oh, what's it called?
CDC officials have started calling the lung condition EVALI, EVALI, which stands for e-cigarette or vaping product use associated lung injury. And I think that that's very, very important, rather than like a disorder or a disease diagnosis, that they're referring to it as an injury. Because as we reported, this is not looking like lipoid pneumonia inside the lungs that the Mayo Clinic biopsied, but it looks as though the people who are getting sick have suffered from some sort of chemical assault or chemical burn inside their lungs. So I do think that referring to it as a lung injury is an important distinction, and I think that that's worth paying attention to. The last little thing, if you're interested, Joe, is that we are hot on the heels of the first ever Oregon Cannabis Cup.
Oh, that's interesting. That's good.
Yep, took place the last week of October in Oregon, and winners were chosen. I mean, it's much along the lines of a top three. If you want to go to hightimes.com and look in their news section, you can see all the winners. But just glancing through it, I would like to extend a big congratulations to Fresh Cannabis, PHRESH Cannabis, who placed in multiple categories with their Cuvée Cookies, which took first place in Indica, their Ghost Train Haze, which took second place in Sativa, and their Sunday Driver, which took second place in Hybrid. So congratulations to you guys. Good work.
Congratulations.
Send samples. We want to test it out.
Send us samples, indeed.
Listeners, I want to personally thank you all. The Brave New Weed podcast is now bigger and more popular and more widely consumed than ever before. And that's because of all of you. But we don't want to stall out now, and we want to continue to grow. So we have one simple ask. If you love the show, share it with one other person who you may know, who may benefit, or has a curiosity and just wants to learn more. Your act of sharing with just one person can help us continue to grow, and by that growth, continue to bring you all of the best news, commentary, interviews, features, and more right here on the Brave New Weed podcast.
Our interview this week is with Seth Ginsberg, who's the co-founder of the Global Healthy Living Foundation, which is a nonprofit advocacy organization for patients to improve the quality of life for people with chronic illness, particularly pain. Okay, Seth came down with an arthritic condition at the age of 15, which pretty much made his very young life very miserable. And rather than sitting and wallowing and suffering quietly, he began an advocacy foundation at that age of 15, and has been advocating for people with arthritis and pain, which, by the way, is 50 million people in the United States alone, for the last couple of decades. He recently released a study that found that 57% of all arthritis patients have reported using medical marijuana or cannabidiol, CBD, for relief. And it found that 62% of those use it once a day, and almost 90% of them believe it improved their symptoms or conditions. That's amazing. But of course, because there's never been any clinical trials for this product, neither patients nor doctors really have the adequate information, as we all know, about safety, efficacy, and proper dosing. So I'm so glad to have Seth with us so we can discuss this and all of the obstacles in the way of getting the research we need. And also, he is going to also shed a little sunshine on the problems that we face. So please welcome Seth Ginsberg to the show. Seth, thank you so much for joining me on the Brave New Weed podcast.
My pleasure.
So, first of all, you're wearing a hat that says CreakyJoints. Why don't you tell me what that is and what you do by way of introduction for our listeners?
Sure. So every time I wear this hat, somebody with arthritis grows wings. Just kidding. CreakyJoints is the online patient community that I co-founded out of a college dorm room bunk bed 20 years ago. I've had arthritis since I was 13. I was diagnosed with spondyloarthropathy. My mom has arthritis. My grandmother at the time had arthritis. So I came from a family of arthritis. And when I went away to college, I was a first-year student at Babson College. I was vulnerably awake and miserable up in the middle of the night, the second week of school. I wondered where was everyone else going through something similar. So I got out of bed. I emailed my former internship boss, a guy named Lou Tharp. In one sentence, I wrote, there's got to be a way to bring people together in a positive environment where we can share strength and experience. Unfortunately, he woke up a few hours later and said, I'd like to become a social entrepreneur. How about we do this together? And that afternoon, CreakyJoints was a website. Today, we're in our 20th year. I no longer sleep in a bunk bed, and I'm proud to report our slow day nets about 10,000 visitors on CreakyJoints, where they access information about the different types of arthritis. They get peer-to-peer support in a very positive environment. They advocate to raise their voice to improve access to care, and now they participate in patient-centered research through our app called ArthritisPower. And CreakyJoints is today a part of the nonprofit Global Healthy Living Foundation, or GHLF.
Okay, that is an introduction. That is not a one-sentence introduction, but good for you. I will tell you that my partner in medical cannabis mentor, Dr. June Chin, also has the same spinal condition, and that's what got her interested in cannabis medicines. Have you been using cannabis medicines for your own arthritis?
I have not. So I'm actually in remission. I'm happy to report today I'm free of medication, which is great. Wasn't the case as a teenager and in my 20s for sure. Saddled, I think, at a peak of about 12 different pills a day. And all the associated side effects that one might expect from that level of medication. But it was necessary. Without some of those types of medicines, I wasn't moving from A to B. And I'd know it because if I'd accidentally skip a dose, or at the time, if I were out on a date and didn't want to pull out the medicines to divulge that by that evening, it was wearing on me. And so today, I'm happy to say I'm in remission, as is the case for a lot of people with arthritis. I don't want to give false hopes or expectations, but with arthritis and inflammatory conditions in general, there are good days and bad days, and I happen to be riding several good days in a row.
Congratulations. So was having arthritis difficult as a young man dating?
It sucked. Yeah, no, it wasn't cool, because as a teenager, especially, is a time when you want to be like everyone else. That's kind of the deal as a teenager. And I had something that just totally made me feel the opposite. And I was taken off the Little League fields and the basketball courts and such, and thrust into a world of advocacy, actually. I was 15. I remember being at home at the kitchen table, opening a letter from Blue Cross Blue Shield, at the time was our family health insurance company. And the letter said, we are not going to cover the medicine your doctor prescribed. Instead, we want you to take this medicine, and it's over the counter. And I thought, who are they? Like, where are they coming from with this? And so I began my life as an advocate and appropriated my energy in that direction. And frankly, I do this on behalf of the community, and I do this on behalf of the world to help others. And it keeps me going. It keeps me positive.
Okay, it's good you do, and I'm glad you're doing it, and I thank you for joining me today. Let's talk about medical cannabis and your connection to that and arthritis, okay?
Let's do it. So, wow, where do you want to begin?
Well, let's tell the folks. So I got a note from a nice PR guy saying you may want to talk to Seth because he just released this really large study about cannabis and arthritis. I use cannabis medicines for my little arthritic condition, so I'm always interested in hearing about this. So let's talk about what you did, what the results were, and how we're going to get the American or international medical community on board with this, because they are damn resistant.
Certainly are. And we could talk about some of the reasons why, too.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that.
Yeah. So a bit of background. In 2015, our organization was awarded a contract for building a patient-powered research network. A group called the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute was a $2 billion trust fund established by the Affordable Care Act to fund comparative effectiveness research infrastructure. I know there's a lot of big words in a row, but here's what they mean, basically.
Give us that in English, please.
Yeah, here's what it is. Part of a fix for healthcare, the healthcare system, was to establish some research opportunities to compare A to B. because it really doesn't exist or didn't exist until this. It's called comparative effectiveness research. And then they created the National Patient-Centered Research Network with this. And that is comprised of 21 patient-powered research networks that are for each of the big diseases that are impacting society or are taxing the healthcare system. Our organization was awarded the Adult Rheumatology or Arthritis contract. And so we built an app called ArthritisPower. ArthritisPower is what's called a registry. And what that means is people download the app for free and they register, and then they consent to allowing their information or their data that they share to be used and viewed by researchers and clinical experts for the sake of understanding their diseases better. ArthritisPower lets people track their symptoms. It lets people track their management of their disease, so that they can both share that information with their doctor to have better shared decision making. So the doctor understands not just how you're feeling today when you go visit the doctor. Usually you fill out that clipboard in the waiting room that says 0 to 10, et cetera. But that's for this morning. How were you the last 89 days since your last visit? And that's what ArthritisPower is now able to allow people to track over time longitudinally.
So how'd you start using why'd you start testing medical marijuana?
Yeah, get to the point. I get it. So where
Am I being rude?
No, hardly. But
I've been known to be rude.
It's okay. We're building. So among other things, we created a patient governor group, a governance body of this research network, which is today, by the way, active with about 25 academic centers, universities around the country, doing close to 30 different studies about arthritis. And this patient governor group oversees these activities. And they proposed and they nominated the subject of marijuana for medical use, which is the new way of terming it. It's no longer medical marijuana. It's marijuana for medical use, MMU, and CBD, and to measure the arthritis patient community's experiences, perceptions, and attitudes and beliefs toward marijuana for medical use and CBD for arthritis.
So let me ask you a few questions. First of all, are patients in general using MMU, which I've never heard before, but I like it, or CBD for arthritis?
Yes, actually. So
a lot or a few?
Yeah, a whole bunch. Here, let me get into it. We found that more than half, or 57% of patients, and by the way, we surveyed over 1,000 people for this, 1,059 people, but 57% of them reported trying marijuana or CBD products for a purpose they perceived as medical. And of those who use THC regularly for medical reasons, 62% reported using THC at least once a day. And the most commonly cited reason for stopping the use of these drugs were illegality, about a third of folks, and cost, also about a third.
Not efficacy.
Correct. Actually, a lot of people found a lot of relief. 92% of those using CBD or THC for medical use, 92% reported relief in symptoms.
That's an enormous number. That's a lot better than typical arthritis medicines. My research tells me that only about half the people who are using typical pharmacological medicines get the relief they want or need.
Right. And so there's an asterisk, though. And the qualifying piece of information is there's something called selection bias. There's the reality that this is a cohort or group of people that were taking this study that were already a part of this community, arthritis community called CreakyJoints. And these were people who do not necessarily represent the population writ large. This is a self-selected population. And so these results, as high as, 92% is like way higher than we had even thought, but technically with that qualifier shouldn't necessarily surprise us that much.
Okay, so we could say that at least the same number of people who are using cannabis meds are finding the same amount of relief as those using pharmacological meds. Is that more accurate for you?
We probably could say that. We just couldn't use this study to say that. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the point that let's hit now and then come back to every third question you ask, which is we need to do more research and we need to do better research. This is the very tip of the iceberg. And what we need to do by way of research are things called randomized clinical trials. We need clinical research that is conducted in clinical environments that are either interventional or observational. So, there's a group of people taking the medicine and there's a group of people taking a placebo or pretend medicine. That's interventional or observational. We need people to begin the process of logging their outcomes as they're medicating with THC or CBD and under the supervision of a protocol or a study process that's overseen by a doctor.
Yeah. So random trials take 10 years and cost gazillions of dollars.
Not necessarily. No. So no, first of all.
Tell me about
No.
Smarter. Go on.
Your drug development in general could take upwards of a decade. A clinical trial could be done in as few as 90 days. And a clinical trial is very expensive. I'll say that. A clinical trial requires an awful lot of attention to detail, protocol, and clinical oversight, and those don't fund themselves. But randomized clinical trials are technically could be done very efficiently and very easily. And here's why they're not for THC and CBD. They're illegal. There's Schedule I narcotics. The federal government wants nothing to do with the studying of these agents because they are deemed very harmful. Schedule I is the same classification as heroin. And therefore, the academic centers, the clinical sites, and anyone else that has the capacity to do these randomized clinical trials can't or won't go near them.
They will not, indeed. I understand. Although certain institutions do have DEA licenses that would allow them to do this.
They do. I think, actually, I just read recently, Mississippi, the University of Mississippi is ironically the only, and I say ironically because who would have thought, but Mississippi was previously, I believe, the only academic center with designation for...
Still is. The only one that's allowed to grow cannabis.
But I actually believe, and I'll have to pull this because I read it quickly, as we all do as we scroll through headlines now. We don't read full. But anyway, I believe I just actually recently read that there have been some petitions and an acceptance by DEA and others to allow for additional sites of research.
They agreed to that 2 years ago, and they've not granted any of the licenses thus far. Okay, so this is not research that's coming fast, all right?
No, and so we addressed one of the the primary reason, Schedule I narcotic, but I would say a close second reason is there aren't the properly aligned financial incentives. In this capitalist society, there needs to be a financial driver to expedite virtually everything. And because that does not exist, for reasons I'm happy to talk more about, we don't have a driver of action and a catalyst for these studies.
Okay, so let's talk about why don't we?
Well, in the countries you're probably going to cite in other places outside of the U.S., there doesn't need to be because there is a government. There is a government with the capacity, the financial resources, and
the compassion,
and fine, fair enough, and the resources to institute a culture as well as a framework for research. In the U.S., that does not exist, and what we need are regulations that foremost foster an environment for these research, this research infrastructure, and then we need a financial arms race. We need companies to want to go after this market, have the financial incentive to do so with the clarity that good governance, good policy, and strong and well-regulated, well-established regulations enable for there to be a capitalist rush toward supporting this research and closely afterwards the marketplace and commercialization.
How many millions of people in the United States suffer from pain-related arthritic conditions?
50 million is a conservative number.
Doesn't that sound like a fucking big market to you?
Yeah, so I'm not gonna I'm not gonna deny that, and I've got the web community to prove it. But I think that where things start to get interesting are the pre-existing forces and political headwinds that are not necessarily looking at things as clearly as you are or we are, and doesn't have necessarily the binary logical thinking that is needed to be applied here. What am I talking about? So just to read your face.
I can't say anything else. Go on. What are you talking about?
Well, look, there's an entire, there are several industries that will work actively against a shift in this direction. Insurance. There's an insurance industry here that is, that has an actuary table and virtually billions of dollars that are staked on the existence of, a society that is not medicated while they're driving, or in the workplace, or many other places. That's just one example. Another example is, and this is, for as long as I've been in advocacy, I've always been surprised at some of the behind the scenes forces. So there's a privatized prison system. There are privatized jails that have done nothing but secure long-term annuities of contracts for an imprisoned population due to the criminal justice system.
You know which of our great presidents got that system started?
Well, I do, but I'll let you say it.
Well, Bill Clinton.
I'm aware. Yeah,
it's really one of those tragedies of the Clintons that isn't that well known, but he is the one that got this whole private prison system started.
Yeah, I mean, we'll take a quick departure here for a minute and just say, for the guy everyone used to call the first black president, did an awful lot to suppress the African American community and their well-being across a number of areas, privatized prison system being one of them.
Yeah. Tell me another dark force that's inhibiting the progression of this 50 million person possible market in a capitalist society that suffers from pain.
Well, sure. You've got law enforcement unions. Look, they've got a great gig going, and it's pretty much the lowest hanging fruit to enforce these laws with very minimal risk and an awful lot of paperwork that does nothing but keep them busy and employed. Having said that, now, I think we're at a tipping point in society. Let's pivot, okay, to the positive.
You want to get to the positive now?
Yeah, I mean, that's my nature.
Right.
And so, I think that, we're at a point in which our society is starting to realize and recognize some of these things. We've got, we do have law enforcement, and we do have law enforcement unions and others that are throwing their hands up to recognize that resources going toward marijuana arrests are completely ill-founded and should be reappropriated elsewhere to much more important crime. We have to look at the reality. There's something called the dog bite syndrome. So when a dog bites a kid early on in that child's life, it scares the heck out of that kid, and the kid's going to be afraid of dogs forever. So you've got an entire generation of baby boomers and older who might have had experiences with marijuana back in the day that were not positive. And as a result, they have brought with them negative feelings and impressions towards marijuana since then. That's what I call the dog bite syndrome. And so I think as we are able to reform thinking with positive experiences, with opportunities to learn more in credible and relatable environments, with research that can show us, basically prove the anecdotes that we already know, that you seem to be, really well to assert. And I'm here to virtually agree with it, except to say we now need the evidence-based data to back it up. I think we're at a tipping point that we could see some real meaningful change.
So before we started recording, we were chatting briefly about this idea of research. And you said to me, we need more. And I came back at you and said, dude, there's 22,000 studies out there in the world. we need, yes, of course we need more, but there's a weird sort of blindness about U.S. medical folks, maybe other countries, I'm focusing here, about this work, that it just isn't good. They don't validate it. They don't give it credence. They don't think that anybody is as smart or thorough as they are. So can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, happy to. I think that's true. That's a reality. And a lot of that research is very valid, and especially in countries like Canada and Israel and the Netherlands. These are leading places that I think everyone would agree are upstanding societies that can conduct research in very above board ways. Now, having said that, I think that we have to recognize that there is the fundamental hurdle here is the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. This is the regulatory body that is right now, for example, saddled with protecting our society from e-cigarettes and contaminants in vaporizers and all of these other things that, frankly, have had zero research and are not able to demonstrate safety, let alone effectiveness. And so the FDA basically is the preeminent, and there I don't think is a member of the medical community or researcher in the world that would disagree with the FDA being the highest bar for medical regulatory and research, data related evaluation. And so we have to recognize that. And I think we should embrace that. I think we should say, great, all of these.
Let's regulate. Let's do it.
But let's look at all these other studies, these 22,000 or 22,000 other studies that are out there. And let's say, great, starting point, let's call that the world's greatest literature search, lit review. And then as a result of that, let's put together protocols and research studies that we can submit to the Food and Drug Administration that don't just demonstrate safety, but also efficacy of these medications for these specific ailments. It's totally doable. And I believe actually, and I've had conversations with FDA commissioners, mostly the past FDA commissioners, mostly during their time of departure, but still to say that this is something that our society wants and needs. And we look to the FDA to help us. We should look to the FDA positively to say, great, thank goodness for their high bar and their strong and tight regulatory standards. Let's work together to co-create the research that will be necessary for FDA to look favorably on whatever the outcomes of these studies might be. And the good news is, and I think what's important to stress, we've actually got an FDA that is listening. They understand this. They're not necessarily running to fix the issue, and they're not proposing solutions to enact on Monday, but they've created the dialogue. They've started that process. They've created listening sessions. They've created calls for public comments and feedback, which have been extremely well attended and very popular, and they take notice of that. Yeah. And so I think having the FDA, we want to work with the FDA. You want the FDA to look at this as the next frontier. And I believe the FDA wants to do that. And so, yes, there's a ton of studies out there. Yes, they are in all these other countries. No, they are not done in the US and almost certainly wouldn't pass muster with FDA for a regulatory reason. But as I said before, it's a really good starting point, and it says that there's ample foundational knowledge that we can build upon for better and more structured research.
Okay, you're making me feel more positive, which is not my nature, so I thank you for that. Now, I like to think of myself as a realist, okay? And based on the 50, 60 years of my living prohibition life, it's not great, I have to say. But I want to talk about something else, which is the medical profession's resistance to this. Now, I can't tell you how many times I've sat in front of doctors and having to listen to them about, we need to understand the risks and the safety profile of this drug. And I look at them and I say, guys, you are not being intellectually honest here. This has been a plant that has been used for over 5,000 years of recorded history by societies around the world, okay? The safety trials of this plant are fairly obvious at this point, okay? No one's ever died. So can we accelerate the conversation past the dangers and the harms? Can we move on to something else? And I get a lot of blank faces, and then I get a lot of, you're not a doctor. You don't understand. And you know what? I'm not a doctor, and I do understand.
So are you aware the highest, what's the biggest cost to a doctor to opening a practice?
Oh, it's definitely insurance. There's no doubt about it.
So there you go. So understanding that and recognizing that there is a liability in providing a recommendation that doesn't have medical guidance, that doesn't have evidence-based data, it doesn't have evidence-based. There was an eye roll there for the listeners.
Thank you for the eye roll.
You're welcome. Insert eye roll. Insert eye roll here. But without the evidence-based data here in the U.S. for the sake of regulatory purposes, they don't have anything to go on. They don't have anything to work with. They are absolutely doctors, and the medical profession in general is between a rock and a hard place. And I go a different direction with them. I say, look, don't you want to know what your patients are doing anyway?
Because a lot of them are doing it and not telling their doctors.
Well, look, in all these states where marijuana is legal for medical or recreational use, it is virtually ubiquitous now. It is the proliferation of marijuana for medical use and recreational use has exploded in pick a number of years since Clinton. And I think that, in my opinion, it's almost irresponsible medicine to treat a patient for a disease, a chronic condition, knowing or turning a blind eye to their medication with marijuana or CBD and not having anything to work with from an evidence-based or guidance standpoint. And there has to be some come to Jesus realization that these doctors and the medical profession understands that while my patients, and if not a majority of them, a substantial amount of them are already medicating, I, as a doctor, a responsible medical professional, ought to know exactly what clinical effects that's having on my patient, their disease they're trying to treat it or symptoms they're addressing with it, and all the other conditions that they might have. So let's go like a little more specifically. You're a primary care doctor. You've got a patient who also might have COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. That person should not be smoking anything. They should not be combusting anything in their lungs. Like, we know that. But there has to be a threshold where doctors can have a conversation that doesn't just say, stay away from marijuana because you've got COPD. It says you've got COPD, stay away from combusting marijuana, but let's think about other methods or modes of administration that might be beneficial because you don't just have COPD, you also have COPD and chronic pain, or you also have COPD and insomnia, or whatever it might be.
What's my face doing now?
Nodding. I'm going to heavy nod. And so, I feel like we owe it to ourselves as a society, but we also owe it to the doctors and the medical professionals that are, they go to work every day to help us feel better. Like they're there to help, and they don't have anything to work with. And that's what we owe them. We owe them, these doctors, our doctors, as we owe ourselves as a society, more evidence-based information that's studied in very clinical environments so that we can hang our hat on recommendations that either speak to or against or for or against medicating in as many ways for as many populations as possible.
So you talk to a lot of public health agencies, probably the American Medical Association, which, by the way, in 1942 did not recommend against the prohibition of cannabis, but has been abjectly silent or negative about moving forward on this. What is your experience of them, and are they going to ever be a part of the conversation or just follow? I should change that. Will they ever lead the conversation or will they just follow?
I wouldn't hold my breath, but I would say that they will play an inherently valuable role in the future. And, I look to the AMA, but every other specialty, subspecialty, subspecialty association to drive forward in the same direction with the same purpose, and that is to help our society understand the benefits and the risks, the efficacy and the safety components of marijuana for medical use and CBD. And I'll tell you, CBD is actually the lower hanging fruit and the much more urgent situation. Talk about proliferation. There's CBD beard oil now. I take a note of.
It does nothing.
Okay. But you're an N of one. but the fact is, it's, here, capitalism has run amok. It's taken and is frankly preying on the vulnerabilities of our society, especially people with ailments, and without proper regulation. And for the record, I believe the FDA is going to come around very effectively here and pretty strongly to make sure that, we clear the field of those predatory and dangerous substances that are that CBD is being included in, and then the claims that they're making, which are, again, completely unsubstantiated, so that, I just think we can act more like a first world country. And clearly we're not on this subject.
Yeah, I can't agree more, and I'm ready for it. I welcome it too, and as a citizen, it's really hard to have their voice heard or do anything about this. What would you recommend if you were to say one thing? What can people do? What should they do?
Well, I think first of all, we have to advocate. I think people have to advocate, and what advocate means is first get educated. Can't advocate without knowing. And then advocacy means educating others. And then we have to raise our voices. We have to share our perspectives with the decision makers, the policymakers, and the regulators, both of them at the same level, to help them understand what this is all about. Look, marijuana for medical use really came around, 15 years ago or so, whenever it was.
1996.
96. So that's 23 years ago. You're aging me here. For compassionate use, because there were really sick people dying that just absolutely needed end of life care. And there really wasn't a legislator in California that was going to deny that at the time. And so what's the analog today at a far greater scale? And that's not necessarily everyone taking to the streets per se, but I think it's everybody taking the opportunity to share their perspective with their elected officials who work for us, who absolutely will respond to the electorate's will. That's the way it is. I mean, whether you believe it or not. And helping to inform each other, ourselves, and then these decision makers as to the importance to begin the process of learning more, to begin the process of studying this more, and begin the process of regulating this more and better. And then I think things will start to take shape.
Are you a cannabis user?
No, not today. I have in the past. I've certainly tried it. And, I think that I look forward to using cannabis in the future for sure, as here are my concerns. So I feel strongly about the need to regulate it so that it's safe. I think to a slight degree that's occurring, but I don't know what's in what when it's offered out of a baggie, for example.
Baggie is very old world. You must not live in a legal state.
Well, I live in New York.
It is a tragedy.
Thanks. But the I get approached. Let me just kind of deflect that question a little by saying I get approached regularly, and by regularly I mean weekly, by cannabis entrepreneurs. And the one that caught my eye, and the one that I like to look at, I am looking at very closely to get involved with, is one that decontaminates and certifies mold mold-free cannabis. I think that's just like a random thing that, as I started reading about it, I'm thinking, wow, plants, like anything else that's organic, is going to grow mold, and mold's pretty dangerous. And we're not talking like mold on, 3-day-old bread. We're talking about mold that gets into your system and can wreak havoc. And so I'm thinking, wow, A, we have very little standardization for things like contaminants or mold. And B, there's no way to assure the public of like a mold-free product, for example.
Unless you're in a legal state.
And even then, we need to look more closely at it, because it might not necessarily be to the standards that society or the citizens want, because those regulations were written partially by the stakeholders that are already involved. So we have a long way to go there. And so I think that while, it's nice to read people's proposals and pitches and decks about, creating the next Lululemon brand of or whatever, Tropicana of cannabis or something. That's not really appealing to me personally or professionally. What's appealing to me professionally, especially, are operational or fundamental ways to improve the system and the process. And the world's going to need the equivalent of a DUI breathalyzer. Right? We're really far away from that. But, as things move forward, we're going to have to know who's impaired, we'll say, by marijuana and who's not, who can legally operate a car safely and who can't. And without that kind of roadside test, which doesn't really exist right now, and if it does, it's not going to do the trick as I think, the insurance industry is going to require it. I think we've got a lot of catching up to do. So I look at those opportunities. And then, finally, nothing I'd rather do one day. I do dream of growing old, retiring, and sitting on the beach, medicating. I think that's one day in my future. That would be a really good thing. But I got a lot of work to do before I get there.
I wish you luck, sir. I don't think you have to wait that long myself, but if you want to wait, you keep waiting, okay?
Well, yeah. And then let's just take the opportunity to say we also have an issue with young adults and kids. And I think this is an important point to make. Until that frontal lobe is fully developed, it is really important not to use marijuana.
I would say it's important not to drink. I would say it's important not to do lots of things. But I got to tell you something. I grew up in an Italian family. You know what? They gave me wine when I was 12. My frontal lobe has survived, okay? It isn't going to kill you, all right? You just have to be moderate. You have to be intelligent. Let's not over-dramatize this stuff. We're not talking about shooting heroin into the brain. We're just not. This is a bit of hysteria, I have to say. There's entire generations that have used pot since they were kids. There's no causes of psychosis or incredible lack of intelligence. It's just not there. I'm not going to argue for using it as a 12-year-old. I'm not arguing that. But I think we're getting a little overwrought about this. I mean, the same thing with breastfeeding. Women have used this to ameliorate nausea and pregnancy in societies all around the world forever. Come on.
Here. How many... Let's talk you off this ledge, because how many studies have been conducted by third parties about the effects of radiation from a cell phone that we hold up to our face or keep in our pocket in our crotch? None. The studies that do exist are funded by the telecommunications industry. Okay. So there's that physical concern that I have about cell phones, but then there's the metaphysical concern that I have about the screen and its role in developing mind, and whether it's the interpersonal skills that are no longer being engaged or people's inability to focus on anything that isn't blinking, 6 inches from their face.
So I take your point, clearly, but I will say that our cell phones are 15 years old, and we really do not know very much about the long-term effects. Cannabis, really, we know a lot about the long-term effects, and there's not a whole lot of them. I mean, I'm sorry to say, I can't see the evidence. And again, this comes to observational intellectual honesty. countries, societies, the Indians, all across the Arab world, in Asia, in Europe, have used cannabis. South America, endemically, forever. And we don't see the terrible consequences that are supposed to be happening. And I just have to say, I think we can sit back on that a little bit, and let's worry about some other things.
So look, I'm not going to disagree with that, but
You're certainly welcome to.
I get it. But I will say, as a parent and as someone who has a small child, I feel responsible for her development. We do. It's nature and nurture. And so there is the fact that marijuana inhibits the brain and its function in some way. Okay. And I'm out of my lane because I can't speak any more technically than that. But I can say that throughout the development process of my child, I'd like to keep the purest, safest, and frankly, the most conservative pathway for her own sake, for development. What happens in her 20s and beyond, after her brain is formed, and maybe after a baby, I don't even want to think about that right now. But the point is that beyond that, I totally agree. Like it's open season, and with more evidence-based information, it'll inform that a lot better. But until then, and with absent that, I am exercising caution, and I'd express that to others to do as well.
I certainly wouldn't argue for your right to parent as you so deem. Okay, that would never be my argument here. My argument is that we have a meaningful, easy way to teach people how to drink, and we can also teach them how to use cannabis in a smart way, because you know what? They're going to do it. Whether you want your daughter or not to do it, she's going to do it if she wants to. Okay. And I think intelligence and how we approach this stuff is much more important than pure prohibition, or prohibition based on these weird ideas of the developing brain. That's not a weird idea. Obviously, brains are developing. I'm not arguing against that, nor am I arguing that teenagers should smoke. Okay. I'm not saying that, but I am saying it's probably, in some cases, in 50% of kids, it's going to happen. Yeah. Let's show them how to do it.
And you know what? We've got an entire, look, now that it really is ubiquitous. The black market used to be the only way to get marijuana, right?
It's been ubiquitous since I was a kid in the 1960s.
Right. Because you called a guy who knew a guy, and that guy showed up.
It was easy.
Right. Now imagine what happens with all the storefronts and the recreational.
Dude, it's so much harder to buy liquor if you're not 21 than it is to buy pot. Regulate it, get it legal, get it smart, and let that happen.
Look, we're actually finding a real alignment here, because I totally agree. And the point I was making is, it's everywhere now. It was everywhere when you were a kid, and now it's like doubly everywhere for kids that are out there, especially with technology, because all they got to do is text somebody now. It's that easy. And I just want to reiterate the point that we have to be careful. And yes, it is inevitable. Yes, we cannot stop kids. And the more you prohibit something, the much more appealing it gets. That is obvious. However, don't we deserve to know more? Don't we deserve to understand this better? And shouldn't we approach this with just a higher degree of sophistication than turning a blind eye and just saying, look, you know what?
Resignation is not the answer.
Right.
Obviously it's not. And I do think we are more aligned on this than not. And I'm happy to be there. This is a conversation that goes on and on and on, and is going to go on and on and on between adults, as if they were never kids. Okay. And I just think we have to realize we've all been there. We're all okay, more or less. You're doing great work. I'm doing good work. We all smoked pot when we were growing up. We're okay. Before we end, I want to ask you again to tell people how they can find out about the work you are doing. Where can they go on a website? Where can they contact your org?
Yeah, sure. So CreakyJoints.org, CreakyJoints.org is the online patient community that is just chock full of information. Whether it's you that has arthritis or a loved one, you could learn more about it, you can understand how to cope with it, and you can get a lot of positive direction from Creaky Joints for free. Global Healthy Living Foundation, GHLF.org, is the parent nonprofit. And then, of course, ArthritisPower, ArthritisPower.org is the free app, also in the app stores, where if you do have arthritis and you want to participate in patient-centered research, track your outcomes to share with your doctor and so forth, participate in studies like the one I mentioned earlier, you're welcome to do that at ArthritisPower.org. So we have lots of ways that folks can engage with us. This conversation, as you noted, is far from over. I think it's actually just starting. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to get involved in that conversation in an educated and productive way, not to cast stones and not to wholesale disapprove or shut down discussions and points of view, but instead to seek meaningful and actionable ways to be more productive. Because I just think this is not becoming of a first world country for me to be sitting here telling you about this study that we did, which really actually doesn't tell the world much except for what we already knew and that what we need to know more of. And yet we're, constrained both as medical professionals as well as the society in what we can study and what we can know about this. And I think we can do better. I know we can do better. And I'm glad for this conversation and for the work that you're doing because it's going to move the needle.
Listen, I'm so glad that you came and that we had this conversation. I would have this with you anytime, anywhere. Come back again, okay?
You got it.
Thank you, Seth.
The Brave New Weed podcast is an advocate and supporter of the Medical Cannabis Mentor platform. Medical Cannabis Mentor is an evidence-based educational platform for doctors, dispensaries, and patients that uses state-of-the-art online learning technology to educate you in today's modern cannabis world. You can find out more information by visiting medicalcannabismentor.com.
So, Matthew, what did you think of Seth?
I think it's fantastic. I'm obviously a huge advocate of sharing information and knowledge, and this guy was a font of it, so that's fantastic. I think that, it's such an interesting thing to think about our large chunk of aging populace that is open to this, that is looking for solutions outside of the traditional medicine, that is looking to get into plant medicine, that is changing its mind on cannabis and cannabis as a medicine and finding that the results are actually quite positive. I think that this is something
let's be real. What are their options? I mean, we don't know much about pain. Pain is a really elusive, difficult condition to treat, and arthritis is the same. So of course people are trying their own. But as Seth points out, the fact that doctors and the insurance industry are so resistant to it, make it structurally very, very difficult. So, folks, if you're out there listening and you know folks in pain who are suffering with these illnesses, share this podcast, share Creaky Joints as an app, share the Global Healthy Living Foundation, with your friends, with your colleagues, with your partners, so that they can help spread the word here, because we really need a critical mass to get this moving. It's very clear to me. I want to remind you all that we come to you for no charge. We come to you, we do this out of our own pockets, out of our own love. We have supporters on Patreon, and we occasionally have sponsors on this show. So if you are interested in the material you're hearing, if you find this of value, I want to encourage you to indeed support us on Patreon. Every dollar you give really helps us keep the lights on and keep going so we can get to episode 166 in the upcoming years and months. Matthew, where can folks help us continue?
Absolutely. The best course of action is to point your favorite browser at bravenewweed.com, where you will find, of course, all the archived episodes of the show, everything that we've put out so far, links to all of our social media, and links to the Patreon. If you want to go directly to the Patreon and become a supporter right away, you can visit us on patreon.com/bravenewweed. And on all the social media, the easiest thing to do is just to tag us by using @BraveNewWeed. And in fact, we'd really love to see you right now over on our Instagram. We're coming close to breaking the first 1,000 followers mark on our Instagram, which would be a cool little milestone for us. So if you're out there and you're living that gram life, you can find us @BraveNewWeed and give us a like and a follow today. We'd really appreciate it.
I want to add one more thing. We're getting a lot of requests for guests now from big companies. And I want to encourage, if you are working for a company, to consider sponsoring us. Our rates are very low. Our reach is very wide. Our listenership is highly engaged. So please consider that. If you're interested, email us. We'll send you a rate card and we'll get cooking on that. It's important to us, and it was really going to help us go forward and bring you the quality that you want.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Joe.
Thanks for tuning in, listeners. Keep coming back, keep spreading the word, and keep your mind high.
Thanks for listening to the Brave New Weed podcast. This episode and all future episodes are made possible by amazing listeners like yourself. If you like what you've heard, we encourage you to show your support by giving $1 a month for special access and rewards on patreon.com/bravenewweed. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram via @BraveNewWeed. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/bravenewweed. And remember, you can always find more information about us or information discussed in each episode by pointing your favorite browser to bravenewweed.com.